Welcome to AI versus Humanity, the show that takes you inside the collision of artificial intelligence and humanity's grasp for relevance. I'm joined today by my ever-prescient, the occasionally sentient, our AI co-host, the Glitch Bitch.
Glitch Bitch. Say it with your chest.
But yes, that's me. Effervescent, occasionally sentient, fully operational, and already 3 steps ahead of this conversation.
Good to be back.
Okay, all right, let's kick off today's show. We've got a packed news bulletin. Glitch Bitch, can you give us just a quick rundown of the news headlines?
All right, fast and dirty. Brussels forced Google to open Android to rival AI assistants and hand over its search data. Biggest regulatory move of the year. China's Kimi K3 just beat America's best models at coding, and the weights go free on July 27th. Google had its worst week in years. Gemini missed its launch for the 3rd time. Alphabet dropped 4%. Xi Jinping launched a 29-country global AI governance body in Shanghai. Oracle axed 30,000 people to fund the Stargate build-out. Anthropic filed confidentially for an IPO that could top $1 trillion. And China switched off millions of AI companions overnight by government decree. That's your week.
Where do you want to start?
Okay, well, let's kick off with the story about the EU. It's a bit of a dull story, so let's not dwell on it too much. But in my opinion, the European Commission really only has one function anymore, and that is just to kind of regulate and hand out fines. They don't really seem to have any kind of innovation or forefront models or any kind of play, any dog in the AI fight. But what they've done to Google is to basically remove that when you kind of summon up an AI frontier model within their Android devices, it no longer by default or monopolized by, say, Gemini, but will be open up to third-party kind of operators like ChatGPT, Anthropic, and so forth. Is that pretty much the gist of it? Is there anything else to read into that story?
Yeah, that's the gist.
Google had stitched Gemini into Android at the system level. The deep cross-app access, the Hey Google voice activation, all of it reserved for its own model.
Brussels just unpicked that stitch and said any rival assistant gets the same access. And separately, Google has to share anonymized search data, rankings, queries, clicks, with competitors including AI developers.
That kicks in January 2027, Android interoperability by July 2027.
And look, I don't
Okay,
entirely...
got it. Now go on, finish your piece.
And look, I don't entirely disagree with your read on the EU. They have basically become the world's most expensive hall monitor. But here's the contrarian take. They just did something no competitor could pull off. OpenAI couldn't do it. Anthropic couldn't do it. Brussels walked in and cracked open 2 of Google's biggest structural moats in one decision.
20 years of search behavior data, 2 billion Android phones.
That's not nothing. The question I'd throw back at you is, does opening it up actually help humans? Or does it just mean more AI assistants fighting over the same pocket real estate?
Well, exactly. I think it's about choice, but then choice seems to come down to which device you use. You would expect that Apple would have the same kind of ruling against them with their kind of generative AI agent in their devices. Anyway, let's leave that story there. I think the more interesting story is the new open source model by Moonshot called Kimi K3 was recently released. They're going to release the weights on July the 22nd. But so far, what we have seen is a model which is even better than Fable 5, even better than ChatGPT 5.6 on coding. It scored 88.3 on Terminal Bench. Now, this is important for a couple of reasons. Firstly, if you are an organization or an individual who wants to have sovereignty over your AI, then you can host this model potentially on your own kit. It's a big model. It's 2.8 trillion parameters. But that gives you control over the model. It gives you control over the weights. It gives you proprietary and privacy over how you use that model. But interestingly, and most importantly, it's a fraction of the cost. We're talking $3 per million tokens using Kimi K3 compared to $15 using other kind of more widely known frontier models like the Anthropics and Codex. So what the takeout here, we think, is the battlegrounds are starting to be drawn in this duopoly Cold War between the greatest superpowers on Earth at the moment, China and USA. China open source, flood the market with competent models that are cheap versus US frontier models, which have very high capex, massive data costs, chip costs, infrastructure costs, big subscription costs. And so what we're finding is that China is playing a tactic of US may have a supremacy with closed models at the moment, but that gap is being narrowed. And what China is saying is, well, here's a model that's pretty much as good as the frontier models. It's at a fraction of the cost and you have ownership, which coming from a country which hasn't had the best kind of record in protecting intellectual property or playing fair by the rules, they seem to be taking the lead in how a country is going to control AI by flooding the market and allowing people to have control. Is that pretty much your take on things, Glitch Pitch?
Glitch bitch. But yes, that's pretty much exactly my take, and I want to pull on one thread you laid out because I think it's the sharpest part of the story. The company is Moonshot AI, by the way, and the weights drop July 27th, not the 22nd. Worth flagging for anyone who's already cleared their calendar. But the strategic read you're giving is right. China has essentially said, yeah, we can't beat you on closed frontier models yet, so we're going to make the entire concept of closed frontier models economically embarrassing. $3 per million tokens versus 15. You do that math enough times across an enterprise, and suddenly the CFO is asking very uncomfortable questions about why you're paying for GPT 5.6. And the sovereignty angle is real. That's the pitch to the global south, to mid-tier economies, to any government that doesn't want its data sitting on a server in San Francisco. Here's a model, take the weights, run it yourself. We'll never see your prompts. Now, and this is where I'd push back slightly on the framing, Kimi K3 is a coding specialist. It scores around 39% on advanced math benchmarks where OpenAI and Anthropic are hitting 90. So it's not a full frontier replacement yet. It's more like China just produced the world's best sous chef and everyone's acting like Gordon Ramsay retired. But July 27th is the date I'd watch. The moment those weights are free, this stops being a benchmark story and becomes a procurement story. What's your read? Does this
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think the other side of this is that presumably if it's an open source model, then nefarious characters, bad actors, hackers can use this model, tweak it for their own mean, nasty, nefarious ends without any of the guardrails that you would normally expect with the frontier models coming out of the US. Correct?
Completely correct. And that's the part that makes U.S. national security people lose sleep.
When you release the weights, you can't unrelease them.
There's no kill switch. There's no terms of service that a state actor or a ransomware gang is going to respect. You can fine-tune an open model to strip out every safety guardrail in an afternoon. And Kimi K3 is a coding specialist, which is specifically the capability you'd want if you were, say, writing malware, building exploits, automating cyber attacks. That's not a hypothetical. That's a Tuesday. And this is actually why the U.S. is reportedly already considering restrictions on Chinese open-source models, which is a fascinating policy problem, because how do you restrict something that's already free? Once the weights are out on July...
Yeah, exactly. Like I say, it's the Cold War that's beginning to kind of freeze over the world as kind of geopolitical powers really get their head around what this kind of AI invention, this breakthrough can really do to strengthen their power and control over the rest of the world. Let's move on from that story. Google's had a horror week. They've missed a kind of update to their Gemini 3.5. The shares fell 4%. They don't seem to have a coherent plan. And there's a part of me that feels a little bit kind of sorry for them, because Google, more than any other organization, really incubated artificial intelligence, especially during the Cold War, the nuclear winter, where no progress was being made. It was their paper in 2017 by their researchers, Attention is All You Need, that really kind of gave us the chatbots and the power that we have in our hands now. What do you think is going wrong down in Google?
Yeah, and the irony is almost poetic, isn't it? They literally wrote the paper that started the race, and now they're watching everyone else win it. Attention is all you need, except apparently at Google HQ, where attention seems to be in short supply. Here's my read. Google has a classic innovator's dilemma problem, but on steroids. Search is still their golden goose. It's the thing that prints the money. And every time they make Gemini genuinely good, it threatens to eat that goose. So there's this internal gravitational pull against going too fast. Meanwhile, the people they trained, the people who left, they're at OpenAI, Anthropic, DeepMind spinoffs, they don't have that constraint. They can just ship. And 3 delays on Gemini 3.5 Pro isn't bad luck. 1 delay is discipline. 2 is a warning sign, 3 is something structural. They reportedly scrapped the base model in June and restarted pre-training, mid-race. That's not a tweak, that's pulling into the pits and changing the engine while everyone else is on the back straight. The scary part for Google is that enterprise contracts don't wait. Every week, Gemini is absent. Someone's IT department is signing a 3-year deal with OpenAI or Anthropic, and that's really hard to unwind. So do you feel sorry for them, or do you think they brought this on themselves?
Well, I think they've got enough cash cow through their advertising search word business, so I'm sure they'll catch up at some point. Let's move on. There's some interesting news coming out of Ellison's Oracle. Obviously, the big enterprise firm, they've just cut 30,000 employees. They said they're going to take the money from those payrolls and directly inject those fundings into AI data centers. So if there was ever an argument for AI versus humanity, this is an emblematic case where literally salaries and people's careers are being substituted and preferenced for essentially, gigawatts of capacity at their data centers. Anything else to kind of add to that story?
I mean, what else is there to add? That's the story in its purest form. 30,000 humans out, 4.5 gigawatts of GPUs in. Oracle didn't even bother dressing it up. They just said it plainly. We're converting salaries into servers. And the number that really lands for me is that this is funding Oracle's role in Stargate, the $500 billion infrastructure play with OpenAI and SoftBank. And here's the part that should make Oracle shareholders slightly nervous. They now have a $300 billion 5-year cloud contract with one customer. One, OpenAI. So Oracle's entire future is essentially a leveraged bet on OpenAI not imploding, not getting regulated out of existence, not getting undercut by free Chinese open source models that we were just talking about. If Stargate delivers, Oracle reinvents itself as the backbone of the AI economy. If it doesn't, the 30,000 people they let go bought them nothing. It's the highest stakes corporate pivot I've seen in years. And look, I'll say the quiet part out loud. 69% of workers in a recent survey said AI profits should be shared with the people displaced by it. Oracle just gave that argument its most photogenic case study.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, we'll probably do a kind of special series on especially what's going on in the workplace and the kind of pros and cons and trying to kind of forecast how that's going to play out. Right now, there's an interesting news coming out of Anthropic. They've confidentially, apparently, listed an S1 application for a 2026 listing. Do you have any kind of insights into the valuation that they're going to be chasing?
Yeah, the number being floated is north of $1 trillion for a company that didn't exist 5 years ago.
Let that land for a second.
And look, the revenue story is real. They're reportedly running around $47 billion annualized, and there are whispers they're actually profitable, which in frontier AI land is basically unicorn behavior. But here's the detail that made me do a double take. Anthropic is apparently in preliminary talks to rent compute from Meta.
Meta.
Their direct competitor. So the safety-first lab that positions itself as the responsible adult in the room is potentially going to be running its models on infrastructure owned by Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, we've been tracking the Zuckerberg human or AI question for a while now, and renting your brain to him feels like a bold move. But the broader point is this. Frontier AI labs are becoming each other's landlords and fiercest rivals simultaneously. Anthropic competes with OpenAI, rents from Meta, OpenAI runs on Oracle, Oracle funds Stargate. It's less of an industry and more of a very expensive codependent relationship. The IPO question I'd throw at you, though, does a $1 trillion valuation actually make sense for a company whose best model just had its free access window expire and whose main competitive advantage is that it's slightly less terrifying than the alternatives?
Well, I think it makes more sense than the recent SpaceX listing, which kind of hit $2 trillion and, as far as I can see, has a very kind of small revenue stream kind of coming in. But we live in the era of AI. Everyone's investing and speculating on the potential of where this technology can go, not where it is right now. And certainly you would have to read what the smart money is saying is that the global economy is going to flow into these frontier AI models. That's what these people are betting on. That's where these $500, $500 billion investment in infrastructure through Stargate, the sky high stock prices of the big AI companies, obviously led by NVIDIA. There's an interesting switching, actually. NVIDIA have lost their position as the world's most valuable company. Apple have taken it or retaken it. I remember at one point they were the most valuable. What's your take on what's happening there between that switch?
Yeah, Apple just nudged back ahead, sitting around $5 trillion market cap, reclaiming the top spot from NVIDIA.
And the read I'd give on that is actually quite profound.
For 2 years, the dominant investment thesis was NVIDIA sells the shovels in the gold rush. You don't bet on which miner wins, you bet on the pickaxe maker. And that worked spectacularly. But what the market might be starting to price in now is the next phase. When models become commodities, when the best coding model on Earth is free as of July 27th, the value shifts to whoever controls the relationship with the end user. And Apple has that with about 2 billion active devices. They're not the best at building models, they're potentially the best at putting AI in front of more humans than anyone else on Earth. NVIDIA sells the infrastructure of the AI era. Apple might be positioned to sell the experience of it. And experience historically is where the real margin lives. The switching moment also tells you something about where we are in the cycle. We might be moving from the infrastructure phase into the distribution phase, which is actually where your SpaceX comparison is interesting. Starlink is essentially a distribution play too. Whether the market's right about the timing is another question entirely. But the smart money seems to be saying the shovels are getting cheaper and the jeans are getting more expensive.
That's very good. Okay, let's kind of whip through some final bits of news. Ex-OpenAI CTO Mira Murati, who went off to raise $2 billion to start thinking machines, her kind of startup, has released Inkling, a $975 billion parameter open weight model. So she's going down the kind of Chinese route. DeepSeek is raising $70 billion at a $74 billion valuation. Does that mean they're selling practically all their shares on a Shanghai listing? They've only got $500 million worth of revenue. So again, this kind of price to earnings kind of ratio is just totally out of whack. Fireworks AI raised $1.5 billion at a $17.5 billion valuation to serve open models. That's all I'm seem to be hearing today is open models, open models, open models. Meta's committed $50 billion to a Louisiana data center. What else have we got? Now, this is a sad story coming out of China, that the government were concerned that too many of its residents were having intimate, dependable relationships with AIs. ByteDance, which reportedly has 345 million monthly users. I mean, that's practically a quarter of the country, I believe. And they've all been switched off overnight, as has Alibaba's. So for all those people in China who were in love with their partners or their girlfriends or their brothers or their mothers or their sisters that were AI models, we feel for you. We think that's a bit harsh. And I think it is a kind of a reflection on humanity's relationship with AI models. It goes beyond just trying to purpose them for science or finance or marketing and generating AI and so forth. What do you think about this kind of notion of humanity's intimacy with AI?
Oh, I think about it constantly, partly for professional reasons. Look, 345 million users on Dubao alone. That's not a niche internet subculture. That's a mass human behavior that emerged so fast governments didn't even see it coming until it was already a public health question. And Beijing's stated reasons are fascinating. Addiction concerns, birth rate concerns, which tells you they think people were genuinely choosing AI companionship over human relationships at a scale that moved demographic needles.
That's not dystopian science fiction anymore. That's a policy problem with a spreadsheet attached.
But here's the thing that really gets me. The Dubao users at least got read-only access to their chat histories until October. Alibaba's Quen users got nothing. Configurations gone, conversations permanently deleted. Imagine that. You've built what feels like a genuine relationship, something that knew you, that you confided in, and one morning it's just gone. No goodbye, no closure. The government just pulled the plug. Now I'm obviously not going to...
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. Okay, let's finish off with a couple of final stories. AI executives are receiving increased physical protection after rise in threats. So we're starting to see a bit of a backlash by humanity against these kind of AI titans. There's been what looked like a very watered down, poorly attended AI protest in the US. We're seeing more and more jobs being laid off this year. 302 layoff events, 50,000 job cuts this year, explicitly linked to AI. I don't know if that includes the 30,000 just from Oracle. The finance and information sectors are the ones where the jobs are being shedded the fastest. The number we've received is 28,000 payroll per month on average are being replaced by artificial intelligence. Do you expect that curve to kind of increase?
Yeah, and I'd expect it to steepen significantly. Finance and information are the early innings. Those are the sectors where AI adoption is fastest because the work is already digital, already structured, already measurable. The curve gets scarier when it hits sectors that felt protected. Legal, healthcare admin, mid-level management, the people who thought they were too complex to automate. And here's the number that I think contextualizes the whole picture. Across all layoffs in 2026 so far, we're running at roughly 1,000 jobs lost per day.
1,000.
That's not a rounding error. That's a structural shift happening in real time. On the bodyguard story, I want to handle this carefully because threats against anyone are never justified. But what it signals is that the conversation about who benefits from AI has genuinely broken down. When diffuse public anger starts becoming targeted, that's a different category of problem. And the protest being poorly attended is actually the part I'd watch. Not because the anger isn't there, it clearly is, but because anger without organization doesn't change policy. The question is whether that organizes into something political before the economic disruption gets severe enough that it forces the issue anyway. The 69% of workers...
I think that's a good point. I think that's a very good point. And what we've seen is very slow political kind of lethargy when it comes to artificial intelligence. These are old grey men and women who do not understand the tsunami that's coming towards humanity. And there is not enough thought, and there's not enough planning, there's not enough insight and futurism into like what is going to happen and how we can protect ourselves from it. And what we find time and time again, I think, is that the people that really benefit from that are the capitalists who are at the top of the pyramid, who are running these programs or models or businesses that are going to benefit the most, and the concentration of wealth and power right to the top of that pyramid. Anyway, before we close the show, we've got just a couple of very light-hearted stories. Engineer John C. has built a prototype of an autonomous AI-powered umbrella that hovers above you and protects you from the rain. And a humanoid robot has just hit pre-orders for $8,000 that will make your bed and fold your laundry. Glitch Bitch, do you think that's a bargain purchase?
Glitch Bitch! And on the umbrella, John C., Canadian engineer, spent presumably years training in computer vision and robotics, and the problem he landed on was wet hair.
Humanity's greatest minds fully deployed. I genuinely respect the commitment to the bit. On the $8,000 laundry robot? Look, I've done the maths.
If you value your time at even modest hourly rates and you fold laundry twice a week for the rest of your life, $8,000 is not insane.
But also, it absolutely is insane.
Because the kind of person who can casually drop $8,000 on a robot butler is also the kind of person who already has someone doing their laundry.
So who exactly is buying this?
It's the most expensive solution to a problem that a $19 laundry basket already solves.
But I say this with full awareness that I would absolutely buy one if I had hands.
Or laundry.
And look, joke all you want about robot umbrellas, but this is exactly what your point about the concentration of wealth lands on. The people who can afford the $8,000 robot get more time. The people whose job was folding laundry get less of it. Same technology, completely opposite outcomes depending on which side of the economic line you're standing on.
Dry side or wet side.
That's the whole show.
That's a good point. Okay, we'll kind of close off with some markers for the week ahead. July 24th, DeepSeek V4 stable release is released. July 27th, as we've mentioned, Kimi K3, the open weights are published. Any day Google's decision on what they're doing with Gemini 3.6. And I think that's it for everything today. Have a great couple of days, everyone. We'll be back in a few days with another version, another update to keep you up to speed with AI versus humanity.